Welcome to Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to business continuity, resilience, risk, COVID, well-being, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I am the only Alex Fullick there. I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. As you can see by the video, it's a common guest here who's returning, I think, third or fourth time? I forget.
Might be four.
Fourth time. Everyone knows this rock star in the industry because, let's face it, Brian, you are. Like to welcome to the show, Brian Zawada. Brian, welcome back.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and you're on the West Coast, a little chilly out there, and not to rub it in, but it's nice and warm where I am.
I'm jealous of your weather, as we were just talking about. But thank you.
So today we're going to talk about the recent DRJ conference in Orlando. And you had a topic there, and it was, let's see, let me get the right title, Business Continuities Fit Inside Integrated Risk Management. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of give us a little bit, I have other questions for you, but can you give us a little highlight of what you were talking about there?
You bet. When I did the introduction to that session, the point that I raised was that my organization had back in July joined Risk Connect, and Risk Connect is an organization that delivers many different flavors of risk management, both insurable and not insurable. And with that comes all kinds of terms, all kinds of what many people might perceive as different disciplines. And so what we did was we took that history over the last 6 to 8 months since I joined and kind of gave my I'll call it maybe a summary of what I've been experiencing with our clients that may not be like fully versed in business continuity and are really covering things through the lens of integrated risk management or governance, risk and compliance, GRC, all kinds of other acronyms, third-party risk, ESG, the list goes on and on. And so what we did was we took the opportunity to maybe provide some layman's definition of integrated risk management and all those other three-letter acronyms and talked about how business continuity could be a fit or really a partner with all of those different risk disciplines and what we're seeing in terms of what good looks like and the business benefits where business continuity is a big part of or a good partner to GRC, enterprise risk management, all those different groups, and how when you share information, the outcomes only improve. Each group becomes much more efficient, and you're able to connect the dots better, as opposed to kind of living in a kind of a stovepipe, so to speak.
I agree. Client last year, we started to talk about how does business continuity address all these enterprise risks that were in their enterprise risk registry and the ones that ended up in front, excuse me, of the board of directors and the senior management. And then they could see, so that's how business continuity contributes, not fully addresses, but contributes to this.
Yeah, and I recycled a slide at DRJ where it was a webinar I had done maybe 2 or 3 weeks earlier. And it was a list of many different, I'm going to call them, you called adverse situations, any type of situation that really throws off business as usual in an organization. And but just kind of a show of hands, I kind of went down that list and I said, do you think you have a role in this? Do you think you have a role in this? Do you think you have a role in this? And it was kind of a trick question because everybody should have raised their hands for every one of them. But the reality was we had everything ranging from 100%, and that was in like the area around cyber response, all the way down to what I estimated at 15%, which was what happens if your organization has a liquidity crisis and threatens it as a going concern. And it was really interesting to understand different people's perspectives on, the boundary of the type of adverse situations that they have to address.
Why do you think that's the case? That not everybody put up their hand for every single thing that was on your list?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there could be some very good reasons, which could be that, hey, this is the box, if you will, that my organization has assigned to me. It could be that someone else has that responsibility, or perhaps it's a situation where, I just hadn't thought that I could contribute to that. And it also goes back to, I think, a situation that we as a profession or as an industry continue to be slightly plagued by, which is we really haven't necessarily gone ahead and fully defined in a repeatable way across organizations globally, what does good look like and what is the outcomes that we're providing that adds value to our organizations. And I think sometimes when we try to pick off certain adverse situations and say, that's what I do, but I don't do these, we really do confuse our sponsors and those that ultimately, pay our way in each and every organization that employs us.
Could that be because we're not developing the right networks? If someone didn't put up the hand, no, that's not my responsibility, that's somebody else's. Should we not still be reaching out to that other group, whether it's
That was
this group or somebody else?
Key theme that we brought up at DRJ. That's exactly it, Alex. I mean, it's sometimes I actually told a story. Let me just say it this way. I told a story during that presentation where I had visited a client that actually is using multiple parts of our software solution. And that included things like project risk, insurable risk, ERM, enterprise risk management, and business continuity. That's 4 products. And those products are naturally can be tied together quite nicely. The interesting thing was I show up in the conference room and 3 of those people had never met each other. And I thought, wow, that's really telling. Why is that? And it wasn't that I was trying to put them on the spot and say, why don't you know each other? But we kind of gradually unpacked that. And I think it does go back to some, potentially I just made assumptions that this is my job. I'm going to put up the blinders and I'm going to go and not realize that the potential value or the efficiency that can be introduced by working together. And it's just amazing how those different groups, like I mentioned project risk and I mentioned business continuity. Those were 2 of the 4. How many projects go bad that create an adverse situation? The business continuity then can lead the response. It's so obvious, I think, at least to me, just because I've seen it so many times, but it's amazing that they just hadn't connected those dots. And you see so many bad situations, headline grabbers like Silicon Valley Bank, where if only people connected the dots, networked together better, thought about, hey, this situation, the context of this situation, that if they came together, some of these bad things probably would never have occurred.
With a project management and program management background as well, having been both, my goodness, it's unbelievable what happens and how bad sometimes projects can go.
Yeah, it's not about fires and floods and hurricanes and tornadoes all the time. It's quite frankly, it's stuff that's inside the organization that really the way we manage our organizations and manage change that can create such a so many problems. But if we just got ourselves together and really thought through the implications there, it's just one example.
You touched on something else too a little bit earlier, getting our act together when it comes to sometimes the terminology and the way we're speaking as well. And you and I, before we started recording, that we have our industry has been around for a few decades now, and yet we still don't have agreement on some terminology or things, common characteristics.
Yeah, well, you spend more time talking about our differences than what is the common elements that define what good is. Not only our outcomes, but how we go about them. And it's interesting how many, I suppose if I had 100 people, if we were we had 100 people in an audience in front of us, Alex, and we said, how many of you believe that managing the risk or the continuity or resilience of your supply chain or your network of third parties is important? I got to believe we're going to have well over 90 hands raised, right? But yet, how can we expect interoperability between us and our supply chains if globally we can't understand and what good looks like and agree to that? And so instead we get into all these debates. So should I or should I not do a BIA? Is how important is a plan? All of this op-res versus business continuity. We spend all that time infighting when we really should be talking about what does good look like? What can we all agree to so we can have that interoperability? And I think that's going to be our next inflection point, I think, as a profession, is to be able to get to good consistently and agree to that profession wide so we can work so much better together across organizations, across industries, globally.
I agree. I think it's like the word resilience. There's going to be some common characteristics that can define good, but ultimately the overall picture of good may look different in my organization than it does in yours. But yet we do have some common characteristics that put us on that path to be good because it's working for us.
Yeah. And I think if we all can kind of maybe table some assumptions that we make about maybe historically, this is what we've done. If we can table those assumptions and just kind of open-minded to see, again, what's the common elements that we all can agree to, I think we're going to have much more happier program sponsors, executive management teams. I think we'll have consistent introduction of value that, we're not the first group of people on the chopping block when there's an economic downturn. And I start seeing some of that taking place because so many executives are like, I don't understand what these guys do over here. Yeah. They're probably one we can do without for right now. And unfortunately, that's just how many think. And I've had those conversations with people, but yet once you connect the dots and connect the executive to business continuity or the person leading that effort, get them to talk the same language and talk about outcomes and be very concrete, it's amazing what happens just through improvements in engagement.
A couple of things again. You were talking assumptions. I'm going to put my project manager, program manager hat on again. A lot of times we don't actually document those assumptions. And if we do, we don't challenge them. And we just go on and on and on for years. And I've seen that happen. There's such and such assumption. It's never challenged. And then everybody plans around that assumption. And then what happens down the road.
I think one time when I was a guest on your show, we talked a little bit about the book that I had written and released back in 2021 now. And one of the topics we talked about was the concept, and I talk about in the book called the frame meeting. And the frame meeting is an engagement technique with leadership. You're answering 4 questions, super simple. Why are we doing this? What are we trying to protect? How much do we need? And who should be involved? And this sounds so simple. But once you gain agreement on that, all of a sudden the assumptions kind of wash away and you're automatically in sync with your leadership team and they're in sync with one another in terms of what good looks like. And it's that type of, I think, getting it back to basics, having good communication and engagement that's so incredibly important, both inside the organization and certainly amongst partners.
As an FYI for you, I used those 4 questions last year with a client, and it was rather interesting, the responses I didn't get back, because they'd never asked themselves that.
Right.
It was simply someone else will take care of this and do it for us. But
and equally interesting is when they all have different perspectives, but yet they share them together. All of a sudden they leave the room all on the same page. And that's huge, because how many times have we had different executives with different expectations that we've had to navigate? And that can be pretty tough.
No, that never happens. I'm actually using those 4 questions with the current client as well. And there were 3 of us in the room, and there were 3 different perspectives.
It's so common. I don't think I've ever been in a room where there's been less than 2. And, but at the same time, the goal is to leave the room with 1. And then think about how much better your job is and how much more focused and efficient you are as the person leading the continuity and resilience effort in your organization.
Well, why is that so hard then? Why is it so hard to come to that point where everybody is on the same page? Is it because us in the industry, we don't have ourselves on the same page, or we are so far down the pecking order that by the time our message gets up to where it needs to be, it's been diluted and changed?
Could be all the above, I think. And sometimes I think we're a little bit shy to ask for a little bit of time from an executive management team in a more of a cross-functional manner. Sometimes we rely on the person they report to as the key source of intel, if you will, on the organization, and think that person will be speaking for all of his or her peers. That could be tough. That's an assumption we're making right now. And that would be it's a dangerous one, in my opinion. Sometimes, we're seen as overly tactical. and not able to rise up to that strategic level. But yet, if we're able to talk the language of the executive, we'll probably be introduced to them and they'll be much more comfortable meeting with us. Not talking jargon over their heads. We talk about BIAs and BCPs and everything else, but talking about, hey, how do you measure success? What threatens that success? And what are some of those scenarios that you worry about? I'm not advocating scenario-based planning, but borrowing from our operational resilience friends in financial services, it's a very strong way to get in sync and on the same page with the executive management team is thinking in terms of severe yet plausible scenarios.
Mm-hmm. I've been in all those situations that you mentioned, and over the 26 years I've been doing this, I've made all of those mistakes too at some point.
Everybody has. You grow from them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why our industry, we need to learn and grow and be able to do some of the things that you've brought forward. How can we get some of the people that are watching and listening out there to change from all of this tactical stuff and talking about BIAs and BCPs and things like that to align to that strategic perspective that executives have? What kind of things should they start or stop doing or change?
I think one of the things that I credit, in terms of my professional growth over the years was I was fortunate enough that I was able to, not just be focused on business continuity, but running a business focused on business continuity, that being Evolution, from 2005 to 2020. And sometimes I think when I think about the decisions I had to make to run that business versus the decisions that I would make as a business continuity professional for my clients, sometimes stepping into putting that business owner mindset in our day-to-day work, or thinking about, oh, gosh, if I was to step into the shoes of our CEO, our COO, our CFO, pick a C word, think how would they be interpreting what I'm saying or how I'm thinking? What's the perspective they would bring? And I think if we adopt some of that thinking, we're automatically going to be light years ahead from a strategic perspective, looking down on our organization strategically, and then working our way down into the tactical, which is still very important to do. Mm-hmm. But I think when we start with the perspective, the demand, the expectation of the executive, how they think in terms of products and services, how they value the perspective and the opinion of the customer, and bring all of that together, and then obviously it all flows from there. But I think just adopting that C-level mindset and really trying to understand how they think is huge. And sometimes if we step back from our roles and do that, I think we're only going to serve our organizations better.
I think that ties back to some of the stuff you said at the beginning regarding the integrated risk management or enterprise risk management or whatever term.
All those three-letter acronyms.
Yeah, another three-letter.
Yeah.
Understanding what's in that registry and understanding how a BIA contributes to something without saying BIA, throwing another acronym at them, but stating it in a way, here's how I address part of this risk you have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about it, we have, as a business continuity or resilience professional, we're able to step back and see how the organization ultimately connects what we deliver to the customer. And we have an understanding of hierarchy. We have an understanding of all the resources, how they magically come together to deliver value. And yes, we identify risks. Yes, we identify corrective actions, but so do our other peer organizations. But if we're able to share our insight on how the organization works, how they talk about themselves, we're just giving a leg up to everybody around us. And so, yeah, you oftentimes get that learning through places like the BIA. And, sharing that kind of insight is huge. And, in some cases, many of us adopt management system thinking that's described in ISO 22301. Well, our peers would benefit from that too. That idea of management engagement all the way through continual improvement through corrective action. Those are processes that many of our peers use. And, if we can kind of, almost sell them, if you will, on some of those key practices, everybody comes together and we obviously advance the cause collectively when it comes to risk.
I'm curious to know, are there other things in the industry that, what the expression, grind your gears right now that you're seeing that maybe we shouldn't be seeing, or we should change or adopt?
I will say this. I continue to see us becoming much more strategic in our thinking. I see more and more organization, or more and more professionals spend their time truly understanding go-to-market strategy, understanding the customer and how they use our products and services, and what would be the consequence if we were to fail them for whatever reason. And I think it just makes me so happy to see that, because we're not just worried about the applications, then where they reside in the data center, or where do my people work from, and what happens if a tornado levels it. It's a much more strategic view. We're looking at things like not just responding to those adverse situations, but I'm hoping to prevent them. And where are we single threaded? Where are we lacking in a strategy to either recover or do something non-business as usual? And I love seeing more and more of that thinking, because quite frankly, I think our executive sponsors expect us to be thinking that way.
But how did we get stuck in that quagmire of, the earthquake, the fire, the flood?
Yeah.
And why is it taking us so long to get out of that?
Yeah, I think it's just a question of, we just got to keep challenging ourselves, and we need to be having conversations about where do we, where can we be the, I don't know what's the right term is, we're not oversight, but we're kind of that entity that can step back and look at the forest through the trees. And if we can look for all those landmines, we can look at all those situations, all those places where we're single threaded, and not act like, the sky is falling in Chicken Little, mind you, but just being able to look at, where are we vulnerable, and being able to go ahead and talk about that in an integrated risk management context. I think, in building something that's more a cross-functional list of vulnerabilities, and be able to contribute to solving those, and recognizing that it's never done. We're going to keep working on this thing and get better and better over time as an organization, not just a business continuity program. To me, I think that's just where we got to keep challenging ourselves. But I think, it's in some cases, people enter the profession, and perhaps they look at certain standards or certain bodies of practice, and you read about certain situations that sounds very natural disaster like, and we sometimes limit ourselves. Let's challenge ourselves to be above that first. The idea of, let's be thinking about, the strategy of the organization's go to market, and how do I protect that, not just react to certain headline grabbing events like natural disasters.
I think that's something that a lot of executives feel it's never done, but they think it is. When we have a plan, a binder, or an application, that's it. All our prayers are answered. And I think the ongoing part gets forgotten, that it's not a once and done. It's forever and ever. We have to keep going with this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have certain events that, could really trip us up. The plan itself is great. I mean, it's evidence that planning took place. It hopefully contains things that I couldn't memorize. It may describe some of the strategies and substitution type theories that we could run if disrupted. But the real value is, how do I get the right people together that have worked through problems and are starting to get used to each other? They're getting used to being able to be conceptual and think through, hey, well, this just happened. I have this as a starting point, but I hadn't thought about this. How do we work together to be able to address this and get back to normal as quick as possible? That's where I think severe yet plausible scenario thinking, testing and exercises being so incredibly important. Yes, relying on the knowledge we built through things like the BIA and build that, that gave us great situational awareness. But more importantly, it's about people, getting the right people together to solve problems right now and look ahead as to how this thing could get worse. I think that's where the real magic happens.
I think some people too forget that this isn't easy. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. It's sequential. You could go get step 1 done, step 2, step 3, but step 3 can't finish until you revisit 2 and 1 again, to be able to get 4. That you have to keep going backwards, or not necessarily backwards, but drawing from other bits of information to be able to move forward.
Yeah,
it's not a simple start, stop type thing on different pieces.
That's right. I agree with that completely. And I think that's one of the many things we learned from the pandemic is that it's, you're going to constantly have curveballs thrown at you. You're also going to, certain things that you thought were going to be a problem weren't. So, that the question is, how do you be flexible? How do you, build kind of the conceptual skills and problem solving skills and communication skills into the right people so your organization's far more resilient? And that's the key.
I just thought of one question as to what we're saying, and I didn't bring it up before, so sorry if I blindside you here, but what are your thoughts on that tick box compliance mentality?
Well, it's unfortunate that I think that's also a symptom, I think, of a lack of maturity, or perhaps groups of people not being able to articulate the potential value proposition of delivering what good looks like. It's important to recognize, yes, compliance is there for a reason. I'm not just saying that it's all bad. Compliance helps hold people accountable. It creates kind of a mandate. It creates awareness and visibility. But that should always be the minimum. It's not the finish line. And I always, when I hear people say, I'm doing this because I've got an examination coming up, or I've got this audit that's about to take place, or, the customer asked for X, Y, and Z. Okay, great. But what else? How else are you adding value? And I had actually a couple hours ago, I actually had a call with a chief risk officer, a pretty large organization. And I asked her point blank, I said, tell me about your expectations. And she had a couple that were compliance oriented, but she said, those are all nice because they help keep us a little focused. The real reason and my expectation is when something bad happens, I want to make sure that everyone understands who to call, who's involved, and that we muster an effective response to get back to normal as quick as possible. Hard stop, that's my most important thing. And that was in financial services, an area that's highly or more susceptible to kind of a tick the box mentality. But I was so happy to hear her mention that as saying, if I do that, I know all my compliance efforts are taken care of. And it's great to see, it's just great to see kind of an executive perspective on that.
Yeah, I've said to many people that if you've got this tick box compliance mentality, then you're going to get the bare minimum just to get that check mark. And you're not going to get what you really need when something happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you're going to, and my day job involves quite a bit of talking to customers about how they use our software. And, and you hear a lot of different topics. And one of the things that comes up a lot is I need to print out a plan and I said, well, why do you need to do that? Well, I need to provide it to the auditors. Okay, well, what else and they talk about how it needs to look and everything else. I'm like, hey, you know what? Let's take a step back for a moment. How are you going to use that plan in a real event? Well, and then they talk about something totally different, and just asking a lot of why questions gets people out of that tick the box mentality and away from just a focus on satisfying an auditor, but really talking about the value of what they do and how it fits into protecting the go-to-market strategy of the organization. And it's that age-old approach of keep asking why until you can't ask why anymore. And it's really, I think it's a growth opportunity for people that, when you go through that mental exercise.
Yeah, and that, just for the record, we're not knocking audit and compliance people.
Nope.
We expect you to hold our feet to the fire when we say we're doing ABC. A year down the road, you want us to prove we did ABC.
It's a key contributor. It's an essential key contributor to the process, but it's not the end state. That's not the goal, is to satisfy an audit. The goal is to survive that adverse situation and thrive afterwards. That's the key.
Well, Brian, we're coming to the end. Do you have any final thoughts you want to share?
Well, we started talking a little bit about, the idea of what we covered at DRJ was business continuity's fit with integrated risk management. And I know you and I traded emails right before the show. And one of the things I said was, because I was on my way to Orlando at the time, and I mentioned that I ended up rewriting a big portion of my presentation because that happened to be within 3 days of Silicon Valley Bank's collapse, or maybe it was the next day, I think it was. And again, I continue to think of that as a great case study in how we can be a key player as part of an integrated risk management philosophy. Because again, knowing that they had a unique customer base that was in a unique, challenging situation with a unique economic situation brought on by interest rates, there was all these things. If everybody came together and talked, as a group and worked together, they probably could have connected the dots and had a much better, much more coherent, not only prevention strategy, but also would have been much better in terms of just orchestrating an effective response and communication effort with different stakeholders. And I still think this is probably one of the strongest case studies in how we can be a better participant in a larger risk community in our organization. So I think we're going to talk a lot more about that in the future. And I continue to see that as a great, great case study that we should, continue to aspire not to be victim to not connecting the dots.
I think it all comes down, and you said this word, it all comes down to a single word: communication, and
Big
all
time.
its various incarnations.
Yep, absolutely.
And we need to get better at that, and reach out to people to strengthen those ties. And as you say, keep asking the questions why. And if that doesn't happen, well, you're going to get what you deserve at the end, unfortunately. Sad to say. Well, Brian, thanks very much. I'm really glad to have chatted with you once again. And I think you're right, the fourth time on the show. And hopefully there'll be a fifth. I would expect there to be a fifth. Put it that way.
I look forward to it. Thank you again, Alex, for the invitation. As always, it's great to speak with you.
No problem. And hope to see you at DRJ in Phoenix in the fall.
You bet. You got it. Look forward to it.
Fingers crossed I don't have any issues this time.
Fingers crossed.
Thanks, Brian, and everybody watching and listening. Stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.